Hey everybody, how's it going? One of the things that aggravates me most with expensive new purchases are there things that just common sense dictates this should work with the device that I'm purchasing. This feature, it has to be a part of that. If it's a part of the $50 device, surely it'll be a part of the $500 one that, rest assured, afterwards, on page 68 in some obscure forum, they'll mention, oh yeah, by the way, this doesn't work. That's why I think it's really important to bring up that if you buy one of the newer T2 chip-enabled Macs and you expect to use it with your USB 2 audio interface, that it probably won't work. Because if you're like me, you'll think, well, Apple products for the last 15 years have been catering to creative people, to video content, recording studio, broadcast professionals, people that want to be able to plug their FireWire camera directly into their laptop, people who want to be able to run a 100-track Logic session and be able to record 16 tracks in real time without it ever crashing. Apple catered to us. They marketed to us. They made machines that work for us. So surely when they release a new $3,000 machine, they're going to make sure that if it has USB 2 capabilities, that it's going to be able to work with my interface, right? Wrong. You would buy that $3,000 machine and you'd likely have multiple aggravating dropouts in your audio, and you wouldn't have a clue why, because it doesn't say anywhere in the product page that, by the way, all those old USB 2 audio interfaces that you're using, yeah, they may work on a $200 or $300 Acer, but it's not going to work on our $3,000 machine. You get to figure that out on page 150 of a Mac Rumors thread. So the T2 chip in the new MacBook Pros does all this real-time encryption of audio going into it, of the webcam, and so on and so forth, and it also has potential to be utilized in a manner that would keep people from putting parts into the machine that Apple doesn't have their blessing on. So if you were to replace the keyboard or the screen or anything like that, there's a chance in newer versions that you would need to run a little piece of Apple software in order for the operating system to boot up correctly after you replace certain parts of the machine. But that's not what I want to discuss today. What I want to discuss are the side effects of introducing this circuitry into the machine, which are audio glitches and dropouts when using many USB 2 interfaces. So this has right now what looks like a 150-page thread on Mac Rumors with a bunch of people talking about these issues, trying to get to the root of the problem. And there's this one excellently written article over here that says Pro Audio Glitch with T2 equipped Macs associated with USB 2 connections. The dropouts plaguing audio interfaces on Macs with Apple's T2 chip involve an overload of a USB bus running in the slower USB 2 speed, according to an Ableton certified trainer. The problem happens whenever the T2 tries to sync time and location. Trainer Abid Hussein informed CDM. Toggling off set time and date automatically in system preferences will reduce incidents, as will disabling location sync in the time zone tab, but neither setting will fix the glitch completely. At present, the beta versions of macOS don't seem to fix the incompatibility. Listed solutions include buying new gear with Thunderbolt to USB 3 connectivity, switching to Thunderbolt on an existing piece of audio gear if available, or buying a powered Thunderbolt 3 hub that has its own USB controller that will be unimpacted by T2 polling of the time sync routines. And he goes on to explain how the T2 chip works, what it does, and also posts Hussein's full explanation, where he's suggesting that people either get one of these newer interfaces or they get one of these $200 to $300 hubs that creates its own separate USB 2 bus. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this and how I believe this is something that's going to come back to bite Apple in the ass and why I think it's kind of messed up. The first reason that I think it's messed up is that artists make great use of these machines. It's one of the things that you may not expect because artists typically tend to be broke, whereas Apple products tend to be expensive. So why is it that a subsection of the population that tends to have, let's say, below average income in contrast to, your lawyer, your banker, your store manager, and so on and so forth, why do they tend to have more expensive hardware? It's because Apple products for a long time reduced friction to creation. And anything that reduces your friction to being able to sit down and create art, that is incredibly important and worth the investment as an artist, as I've experienced just working with many artists back when I used to intern at Avatar Studios, then I got a job as a tech at Avatar Studios, back when I was really involved in the New York recording studio scene and worked as a freelance technician. It was that even people who could barely rub two sticks together to afford to live in an apartment with 4 other people that were musicians could somehow find a way to afford an Apple product to produce their work on. And it was because, for lack of a better word, back then, they did indeed just work. We're just getting off Windows Vista, that cluster F, and all of the issues with Windows XP. If you were trying to run a pro recording studio on it, if you bought a Mac and you were running, let's say, Logic 7 or Logic 8, it was fairly stable with recording sessions. You didn't have to worry about it crashing as often as Windows did in that time. And if you're charging $50 or $70 or $100 or $200 or $300 an hour for a recording session, the last thing that you want is the thing crashing. So you're willing to pay a little more up front, maybe learn an operating system you're not as familiar with like OS X if it means greater stability. 10 years ago, when it came to recording, Apple stability was amazing. It was rock solid. It was good stuff in contrast to the plethora of hardware inconsistencies and messes you would get trying to combine different interfaces with different machines running Windows. It just worked. Now, contrast that to today and look at how the experience has changed. It used to be that you could just plug in an SD card straight from your camera directly into your computer without having to have a hub. Just reduced one of those barriers. Now, a PC is more likely to have an SD card slot on it than a MacBook, where you got to remember to bring along this little hub that you had to purchase separately, or a dongle. When it came to USB devices, you used to be able to just plug things in without a dongle, or plug in an external screen without a dongle. Now you have to have the dongle. And now the worst part is, even if you do have the dongle to connect your old device, they're not going to mention when they sell you the machine, oh yeah, by the way, this may break compatibility with your recording studio gear. So you may drive yourself nuts for weeks or months trying to find this in this 150-page thread on Mac Rumors to figure out that the reason that your recording sessions have been crashing, the reason that your clients have been yelling at you, the reason that you have lost good takes on your guitar is because of some T2 chip rubbish. Now, you have to think about the fact that people were willing to pay a premium. They were willing to put up with other types of hardware failures based with, the kind of stuff that shows up when you're trying to do innovative design, because for the most part, when it did work, it just worked and it was solid. And now you're introducing all these little barriers. Do you think that that person is going to continue to spend top dollar on your stuff when the stuff that separated you from everybody else just gets worn away year after year after year? It's one thing when you start messing with the long-term reliability. Because when we're talking about issues like the butterfly keyboard, where if you type on it too much, the keys will stop working. The display issue, where if you open it up and down too much, it'll stop working. That's stuff that's going to affect people down the road. But this is a different type of failure. This is the kind of thing where out of the box on day one, you could experience issues with your setup. And once customers realize that it's the fact that they bought a new Mac that is introducing this lost time, these aggravated clients, this headache, now you've taken away the one reason that they had left to spend $3,000 on your product instead of $300 to $600 on some piece of shit Acer. Is that really a smart thing to be doing? Because if you really think about it, if you just go up to the average Apple customer that's working on stuff, in their heart of hearts, what's more important to you? That your working studio setup stay a working studio setup, or that we do real-time encryption of the webcam? Like, most people are not going to care about the latter. I'm not trying to say that no one cares about or values privacy. Like, really, deep down, if you ask your average recording engineer, broadcast person, project studio owner, what is higher on your hierarchy of priorities? Real-time encryption of the webcam and built-in audio, or that everything that's in your studio that you paid thousands of dollars for continue to work without you having to screw with it or experiment with new hardware and buy new hardware and read on forums just so you can get your studio back up and running? What is more important to you? How many people are going to choose the real-time encryption of the webcam over the functionality and reliability of their existing studio setup? The average user cares more, in my opinion, about their stuff working than the remote possibility that if somebody hacks their machine, they can make their way into the webcam. The average user is more than happy to put a little bit of tape over their webcam if it means that they don't have to spend hours upon hours researching to figure out why it is their audio interface isn't working. You have to understand here where when people say things like, why don't you just get new hardware? It's your fault for using that old USB 2 hardware. That this is not the type of glitch where it just says, sorry, interface not supported when you plug it in. This is not the type of thing where it won't even work when you plug it in, even though it shows up. The interface will show up in your system preferences. It'll show up in your DAW. It'll even work fine for a session or two when you go to record and you plug things in. But then it'll drop out, or there'll be a click, or there'll be a pop, and you won't know why it's there when you're recording, and you'll replace your mic cable, and you'll mess with the microphone, and you'll replace the USB cable going to your computer, and you'll reinstall the operating system, and maybe you'll even try with another one of those new computers. You'll return it to the store and get another one, and it still won't work. This is the most obnoxious type of glitch that there is, an intermittent glitch that gives you no error code to tell you why it's happening, that is obvious and upfront, so you'll think that it's some problem with something else in your studio. You won't be made aware that you need to buy a new interface, even if you've got that money burning a hole in your pocket to do so. So even if you're willing to buy a new one, you won't even know that you have to until you have this glitch and you've spent 2 weeks researching to find out that your new machine is one of the only computers on the market that won't work with a standard USB 2 audio interface that every other computer works with, even your old MacBook. And if you propose this feature to somebody, I'm confident they'd say, sure, why not encrypt it? But if you said, oh yeah, by the way, it may randomly make hardware that you have stopped working in a way where you're not going to be able to easily debug it or figure it out in any way, shape, or form, and we're not going to be able to tell you what that hardware is. No! People would not agree to this. Now, I know what many people are going to say. That's because they're using obsolete interfaces, buy new stuff. But you're missing the point. Even if the broke artist that chose to put the last of their pay into buying an Apple product they couldn't afford had the money to do that, why do you want to create this trouble for them? By not saying up front, by the way, our devices may give you issue with your old interfaces. Further, many of these old interfaces on USB 2 are just fine. There's more to an audio interface than simply the protocol it uses to communicate with the computer. Most people who work in the recording studio business would rather have digital to analog converters or analog to digital converters that sound like something you could get with the Lynx Aurora if it went over USB 2 than they would something that sounds like the DigiDesign 888 if it went over Thunderbolt. People would rather have a nice sounding microphone preamp on a USB 2 interface than a garbage sounding microphone preamp on a USB 3.1 or Thunderbolt interface. There is no reason to throw away working gear that does what it's supposed to do simply because you want to create a chip that no other computer has in it that's going to destroy functionality that works in machines that cost 10% what you're charging for your machine. It's one thing to upgrade if your 8-channel interface doesn't work anymore, but the amount of bandwidth that's going to be required to deliver 8 tracks of 24-bit 48 kilohertz audio and some sort of 8-channel mic preamp and analog to digital converter is not going to change from 2006 to 2019. There's no reason to upgrade something that it works when the newer products on the market literally are not going to do anything any different with that new interface. It doesn't make sense. And even if you were talking about it making sense to do those upgrades, you need to think just from a purely Darwinian marketing standpoint, do you want to crap on customers whose primary reason for spending 10 times as much on your product as they could on a competitor's is that it just works? How important should it be to not destroy that notion that when you buy an Apple product, you may have to deal with smug geniuses at the Genius Bar, and they may not be very liquid resistant, and it may be a little bit more sensitive to a drop, and they're going to cost a lot more money, and it may only work right with certain accessories or software. But when you open Logic and you go to do a session with a client that's paying you good money to compose something, it just fucking works. When you're in the zone creatively and you finally figured out after a week how it is the jingle for that advertising agency that wants to pay you $60,000 for a commercial jingle should sound, that you can get it done without thinking about USB 2 dropouts due to T2 chips because it's syncing with time zone and location crap. That's not what musicians want to do. And if you ask the average, whether it's a musician, broadcast professional, video editor, would you rather have this new funky-ass security feature, or would you rather your old shit just work? 99 times out of 100, they're going to say, forget whatever crap the T2 chip offers, I want my old stuff to work. Because if the old stuff works, people will use it. I got to meet a lot of really talented musicians, producers, recording engineers. I got to I got to say hi to the Neil Dorfmans of the world and make sure the studio was working well before they showed up for their sessions. I got to be around really good and talented recording engineers when I worked at Avatar Studios for the time period that I did. And I also got to be around some really cool people when I was working as a technician at some of the other surrounding recording studios at the time before I gave up on that and decided to do this around the 2008 financial crash. And if there's anything I can tell you, it's that none of these people are throwing away good stuff that works, that does what it's supposed to. I remember in 2008 seeing a G4 tower being used at Avatar Studios. The best studio in the world, a G4 tower in 2008. If something works, they continue to use it. Working professionals, real working professionals, not just the people who can't afford to buy new shit. Once they set up their setup and they're in the zone, they use it. And they continue to use it. I know people that won't even attach their working creative machines to the internet because all their plugins and all the stuff they have set up and all their synths and everything will only work on Snow Leopard, and they didn't come out with new versions for the new OS, and they don't want to get viruses or anything, so they won't even plug an Ethernet port into their computer. But they will use this machine to produce content that is worth 6 figures. Do you want to release new products where it's not just this operating system is not compatible with this, but where you didn't even test to ensure that this new circuitry that you've introduced would work with the setups that most of the people who choose to use your products have? Because that's what's the most offensive to me with all of this, is that nobody just sat down and just plugged in some 8-channel PreSonus interface and just said, let's see if we can record music on this, because what people do on our computers appears to be is record music a lot. Let's plug in an ARMI interface and just see if it works for a session. You have over $200 billion. You can afford to do these tests to ensure that your core constituency is able to utilize your products without fail. But you don't. This was supposed to be a 3 to 4 minute video. Unfortunately, it became a 15-minute video. My apologies for the longevity, but I think it's a really important point to get across. Don't fuck over your core customers when you're starting to do any sort of new endeavor or move into a new space. This can even apply to something at a small company like what I'm doing right now. Just me looking to move into a new space. I'm looking to expand into a new area and improve the services that I offer. Maybe I'll be able to take on more jobs, or I'll be able to offer new services that I couldn't fit into my current store. Now, I also was thinking maybe I should make the place a little nicer, so I get a designer. Same way that Apple, maybe we should add a little bit of encryption over here. And I think about how is this going to affect the people that chose to be my customers, my core base, because I can't afford to upset those people. I didn't qualify for any sort of financing. If I fuck up this move, my company goes away, and Eli gets to laugh as much as he liked to laugh on his daily blob stream about Lewis going bankrupt. It's a true possibility where I move and I forget what made me successful. I spoke to several designers before settling on the one that I settled on. While not the best, at least they weren't as bad as some of the others that were saying, no. No tools in the front of the store, no diagnosis in the front of the store, no customers seeing stuff, no. Well, that would make the place look nicer, right? But who would it upset? The core customers that over the past 10 years, when I said, what made you want to use this place? What made you comfortable coming here? Why is it that you showed up in a park to meet a 19-year-old kid in basketball shorts rather than go to the nice company with the nice sign, with the nice uniforms and the nice office? And they would say, I spoke to you. You gave me an idea of exactly what was wrong on the phone. You said the moment I show up, it's not you have to leave it here. My receptionist or clerk will help you make a ticket and then call you in 2 days, that you would look at it right then and there and give me an idea of what's wrong, and it's not like it gets whisked away to some back room where I can't see what you're doing. That creates trust. That's something that's important to consumers. That's why, since I moved to the store that I moved to, 4 other stores that do what we do within a 1-mile radius have gone out of business since we moved here, while our business continues to go up year after year. Because I remembered why my core constituency chooses to spend money with me, and into the future, as I choose to expand and move, I'm going to ensure that I remember why they chose to spend money with me, rather than just add little bits of fluff here and there. The new store in the front is still going to have a microscope. It's going to have power supplies. It's going to have multimeters. It's going to be neat, but it's going to look like a place that fixes stuff. It's not going to have that bullshit look where it looks like somebody spent $6,000 on a nice, perfect little white box room with sexy little LED, like special specialty lighting that's put there by some high-priced designer, when in reality it should look like a place where work gets done, where people have the tools to be able to help customers when they walk in, ease their concerns, let them know that we know what we're doing. Here, you can just look at it along with me as we open it up right in front of you and get an idea of what's wrong with it. That's why people show up here versus anywhere else. Would it be nice to have the little extra frills and features? Absolutely. But if it means that hiring that designer means that I'm not allowed to have what my core constituency valued, what made them choose to spend money with me, then that designer gets to go out the fucking door. They're not getting hired. The same way that if somebody says, wouldn't it be nice to be able to have this little type of encryption that nobody really asked for on this little circuit, that they're just kind of used to putting a piece of tape over the webcam anyway, but yeah, it's going to screw over your core constituency. Ask these questions before you fuck over those customers and screw up their studios. And I think this is a lesson that Apple needs to learn with regards to the creatives that were their customers. The people that did video editing and photography that used to enjoy the fact that they could just plug their SD card right in the machine, or that it actually had a full-fledged FireWire port on it, not that 4-pin rubbish, so that you could actually plug your camera at the time directly into the machine without some sort of adapter mess. The fact that the software just worked with the hardware, the fact that you could just use it, that it was known that if you were doing any sort of video or music production, this was the stable platform. Don't take that away from people. Don't introduce this type of circuitry without testing it to ensure that that segment of your clients is going to be screwed. Because if you do that, you're going to lose a lot of the core constituency of your client base. And the days of you being able to charge $1,200 or $1,500 for a phone, or $2,000 or $3,000 for a machine that you can't even go over 16 gigs of RAM on, soldered on SSD, all this rubbish, I'm telling you, those days are going to be over. Your stock price will reflect it. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something.